Welcome back.
Welcome back, family. I'm Renee,
I am Kyrie.
and I want to say thank you for hearing us out. To all of our longtime subscribers, thank you for sticking with us through this tumultuous time.
hmm
And for our new listeners and subscribers, thank you for being here, for taking time to hear us out.
Thank you. And
We're still, rolling with Frank Herbert's Dune. We're on the last, part three, I'll just
hmm
say, of the first of his first novel, and it's been pretty interesting some of the things that we have
hmm
laid out for our listeners.
yeah. And this is the final hoorah. This is it. It's the last book, and
Mm-hmm.
the last book in and of itself isn't very long. So I've been pacing myself.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I don't want to finish it too early.
Right.
I don't want to have to, go back and stuff like that.
Right.
Still want to keep it fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And but the last time we talked here in book three, it was about how Paul is changing
Mm-hmm.
the cultural base
Right.
that he's meant to represent,
Right.
and how and I think the very last thing that he said and that we talked about was how he was going to subject himself to the water of life to take his final test to truly be
Mm-hmm.
the Kwisatz Haderach, to
Right.
test his vision, to test his power, to make sure that he is exactly what he was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
And we also discussed how, in the last episode, like the cultural type of shift, small
hmm
shift that is happening, where when it was almost demanded of the people that Paul was to kill
yeah,
Stilgar, but he chose to use his words instead,
hmm
and so I thought that was a critical point that was made, and
yeah.
to continue on with what we're doing today.
There's a lot of it's always those. Everything always comes down to these epic battles of words,
Mm-hmm.
except for here in the final part of Dune, where it's going to come down to
Yeah,
epic battle.
yes,
You
time for the
know,
sword or the
and
crutch
but
knife.
even then, we'll see
Mm-hmm.
if there's an overlay for the underplay even there. But
Right.
like we said, there's no glory in it. It's not that everything is tinged with this melancholy, with a bit of sadness.
Right.
Because of this battle that
Mm-hmm.
he knows he's going to have to fight, and that
Mm-hmm.
he knows what he's unleashing. You know, but here in this chapter, now that he's finally begun to test himself, undergo the final test to see if he has the abilities of a Reverend Mother, if
Mm-hmm.
he can change the water of life, if he can survive it.
Right.
You know, here is in this final part. This is, usually the big psychedelic, set piece
Right.
happens at the end
Right.
of a particular part. But
Mm-hmm.
this is before the end. This is right before the end.
Right.
This is the prelude,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the final battle. And I'm going to set the stage here that Jessica has sent for Chani, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jessica has used an ornithopter, which is the flying machines and stuff. But this is one they rarely ever use the ornithopters because they're dangerous
Mm-hmm.
for them to be in the
Sky.
sky,
Right.
use these ships because the skies are constantly being patrolled. So Chani knows that since an ornithopter has been sent for her, that
It
whatever it
must be
is
serious, right?
must be very
Mm-hmm.
serious. And she's called in, and she walks into I think it's called the Cave of Birds that she's in.
Mm-hmm.
She walks into, he's led to Jessica, and Jessica has to now tell her that Paul is in a death-like coma.
Right.
That his coma is so deep
Mm-hmm.
that it looks like he's almost dead, and it's only because of her powers of observation that only she has, is able to tell
Right.
that he is still alive,
Mm-hmm.
but he's very, very close to the brink of death.
Mm-hmm.
And she's tried everything,
Mm-hmm.
but and she can't wake him up.
Right.
And there's only one thing left, and that
Right.
is to
Johnny.
call Chani.
Right.
You know. So yeah. Mm. You have reasons other than courtesy for summoning me, Chani said. I know you, Reverend Mother. What is it you think I may do that you cannot do? She is brave, lovely, and so perceptive, Jessica thought. She'd have made a fine Bene Gesserit. Chani, Jessica said, you may find this difficult to believe, but I do not know precisely why I sent for you. It was an instinct, a basic intuition. The thought came unbidden. Send for Chani. For the first time, Chani saw the sadness in Jessica's expression, the unveiled pain modifying the inward stare. I've done all I know to do, Jessica said. That all. It is so far beyond what is usually supposed as all that you would find difficulty imagining it. Yet I failed. The old companion Halleck, Chani said. Is it possible he's a traitor? Not Gurney, Jessica said. Now they think that Paul may have been poisoned.
Right.
They don't know about Paul's decision to take the water of life.
Mm-hmm.
We know, but they don't. So they're
Right.
thinking that he could have been poisoned.
Right.
Is there a traitor amongst them? And yeah, not Gurney, Jessica said. The two words carry an entire conversation, and Chani saw the searching, the new tests, the memories of old failures that went into this flat denial. Chani rocked back onto her feet, stood up, smoothed her dust-stained robe. Take me to him, she said. So yeah, the stage has been set.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica has told Chani that she has exhausted all of her not inconsiderable skill
Right.
to bring her son out of this coma, but she can't.
Right.
And on just a basic intuitive level, without even her knowing exactly why, she knew that she failed, so she had to call Chani.
Mm-hmm.
It was just instinctual.
Mm-hmm.
Now Chani is here. She knows the stage has been set. She knows that this new companion that they have, the old companion as far as Jessica's concerned, of Gurney Halleck, is beyond reproach.
Right.
She doesn't even question it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if it's not Gurney, fine. You know what? Just take me to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's exactly what Jessica does.
Mm-hmm.
She takes Chani to Paul, and Paul is in this death-like slumber.
Right.
She finds Paul, and then she goes to test him, goes to try to see what's going on, and then when she comes close to him, she smells like this, like the spice is real pungent on him.
Mm-hmm.
And even though everything is tinged with this smell of spice, the fact that it's so strong that she makes note of it, and that's when she thinks, "Don't tell me he did this."
Right.
Right?
Yes, but
Don't tell me he actually did this. I think he actually, she thinks to herself. Let me think. Let me see. Chani sat staring at Paul. If he has tried to do this, she thought, and this the sort of thing he might try.
Right.
So she's thinking to herself after, she's looked at Paul and she's told Jessica to make the waters of life, right? To take the water and change it. And before she tells her that, she tells her to call just to give me some water of life. Calls for the water bears. The water bears bringing some of the water, and she takes a small little droplet of it and hangs it up to his nose, Paul's nose, while he scrunches up a bit. That's the first reaction he's had to anything. And then Chani tells Jessica to take a bit of the water of life and to change it,
right,
to make it not poison,
right,
and try to administer that to Paul. But Paul flies open. He comes back to awareness. He pops back up to life, and he says, "It is not necessary for her to change the water." His voice was weak but steady. Right. So now Paul's back, and I'm going to take it from here because this is where we get into the
good stuff,
the psychedelic parts, right?
Good stuff.
Jessica, a sip of the fluid on her tongue, found her body rallying, converting the poison almost automatically. In the light elevation the ceremony always imparted, she sensed a life glow from Paul, a radiation there registering on her senses. In that instant, she knew. "You drank the sacred water?" she blurted. "One drop of it," Paul said. "So small. One drop." "How could you do such a foolish thing?" she demanded. "He is your son," Chani said. Jessica glared at her. A rare smile, warm and full of understanding, touched Paul's lips. "Here, my beloved," he said. "Listen to her, mother. She knows. A thing that others can do, he must do," Chani said. when I had the drop in my mouth, when I felt it and smelled it, when I knew what it was doing to me. Then I knew I could do the thing that you have done, he said. Your Bene Gesserit proctors speak of the Kwisatz Haderach, but they cannot begin to guess the many places I have been. In the few minutes He broke off, looking at Chani with a puzzled frown. Chani, how did you get here? You're supposed to be. Why are you here? He tried to push himself onto his elbows. Chani pressed him back gently. Please, Mayuso, she said. I feel so weak, he said. His gaze darted around the room. How long have I been here? You've been 3 weeks in a coma so deep that the spark of life seemed to have fled, Jessica said. But it was. I took it just a moment ago. A moment for you. 3 weeks of fear for me, Jessica said. It was only one drop. But I converted it, Paul said. I changed the waters of life. And before China and Jessica could stop him, he dipped his hand into the ewer that they had placed on the floor beside him, and he brought the dripping hand to his mouth, swallowed the palm cup liquid. Paul! Jessica screamed. He grabbed her, faced her with a death's head grin, and he sent his awareness surging over her. The rapport was not as tender, not as sharing, not as encompassing as it had been with Aaliyah and with the old Reverend Mother in the cavern, but there was a rapport, a sense sharing of the entire being. It shook her, weakened her, and she cowered in her mind, fearful of him. Right? Now, let me just explain this little bit right here. That with the waters of life, this poison liquid, there was a combination that Liet Keynes was able to create, one of his many contributions to the Freeman culture. He created this liquid. And when you take this liquid, it's so poisonous that any normal person would die immediately. Mm-hmm. Only a Reverend Mother is able to drink this liquid and convert it into something that is, usable and drinkable,
right,
for the rest of the tribe. Mm-hmm. Right? But Paul has done this. He has taken the waters of life and he has converted it internally using his body chemistry, much like Jessica was able to do, to change the water of life. And through that, his awareness, much like Jessica's, went rolling back in onto itself. When Jessica did it, she felt like she was in a hall, and she saw all of her memories, every moment, from this other Reverend Mother who was pouring herself into Jessica, the Reverend Mother Ramallah. But since Paul, his awareness is different. His awareness is greater than her awareness. Yeah. So what took mere moments to happen for Jessica took weeks.
Right.
This inward, exploration of self. And he's been in there for 3 weeks in a death-like state. And when he takes, a big dope of the waters of life, this poison water, they scream out for him, and she grabs Jessica and sends his awareness, right into her, surging over her like a giant tsunami. And this is something that all of the freemen are capable of. When they take the water of life, it gives them this latent mutual awareness. That's the way, Jessica put it. But it's something of a small telepathic awareness of each other. That they feel each other's thoughts and each other's beings. There's a very latent prescience among the Freeman people. Jessica in herself, she talks about a little early on that, she was tired and she felt like she just wanted a cup of coffee. And without her even having to say anything, someone brought her this coffee. Brought her this cup of coffee, because there's this latent awareness amongst them. It's not as strong as Jessica's, not as strong as Paul's, but it's this very small, latent prescience amongst them, that they have this awareness of each other's needs and wants, and they are able to, just instinctually accommodate for it. And since, Paul and Jessica have been here, and since they've been fighting the Sardaukar and the Harkonnens, right. The Freeman people themselves have been taking more and more of the waters of life, which means their prescient abilities have been coming more and more to the fore. But Paul, when he, does the mingling with Jessica, with his mother, it's not it's not friendly.
Right.
It's not, the mutual awareness that she got when she mingled her awareness with the Reverend Mother Ramallah when she underwent
Mm-hmm.
the test. Because Paul is, they're in a lake, right? They're in a river.
Mm-hmm.
This little oasis. But Paul, like I said, comparatively is an ocean. He's a monsoon, a tsunami, a
Mm-hmm.
hurricane of awareness. That when she feels, and just gets a cursory sense of that thing Paul is operating in, she cowers in fear of the amount of information that Paul is showing himself to be comprised of. And she has to look at it. She has to see it, and now Paul does something here. And now I'm going to read this next little part. But now we have a cursory understanding of this prescient ability that Paul is using, taking advantage of to throw his awareness, throw his mind
Mm-hmm.
into his mother's mind. And here's what he says. You speak of a place where you cannot enter, this place which the Reverend Mother cannot face. Show it to me. She shook her head, terrified by the very thought. Show it to me, he commanded. No! But she could not escape him. Bludgeoned by the terrible force of him, she closed her eyes and focused inward, the direction that is dark. Paul's consciousness flowed through and around her and into the darkness. She glimpsed the place dimly before her mind blinked itself away from the terror. Without knowing why, her whole being trembled at what she had seen, a region where a wind blew and sparks glared, where rings of light expanded and contracted, where rows of tumescent white shapes flowed over and under and around the lights, driven by darkness and a wind out of nowhere. Presently she opened her eyes, saw Paul staring up at her. He still held her hand, but the terrible report was gone. She quieted her trembling. Paul released her hand. It was as though some crutch had been removed. She staggered up and back, would have fallen had not Chinese jumped to support her. You know, and once again,
Mm-hmm.
we see a callback to Jessica's trial. Because remember, when Jessica took the waters of life, there was this darkness inside of her, a place that she could not see. Everything in her told her not to even attempt to look there, right? And that's the place that all the Reverend Mothers cannot look at. That's the male line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she can't look at it, she can't see it, but Paul can.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul not only looked at that place inside of himself,
Right.
he took that darkness. He took the things that all the Reverend Mothers can't see.
Right.
He took that place from her.
Right.
He cast light on the inner darkness inside of her to such an extent that her mind went shrieking in terror. It rolled away. She got a glimpse, just a glimpse, of all of that knowledge, all of that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it sent her running back and retreating into her mind. And once the rapport was gone, like you said, she let go of her hand as if she had let go of a crutch, as if she has been emptied, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
of that place that she cannot see, that she has no awareness of. But like I said, that's what makes her power useful. There is a limitation. There is a thing that she cannot see.
Right.
But Paul, on the other hand, let me continue
Yeah.
here. Paul, on the other hand, is something else.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to see exactly what that thing is. We've been alluding to it time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
He's more than the Duke, more than Eliza El Gaib, and we're going to see right now him explain exactly why he's more than the Kwisatz Haderach. Reverend Mother, Chani said, what is wrong? Tired, Jessica whispered. So tired. Here, Chani said, sit here. She helped Jessica to a cushion against the wall. The strong young arms felt so good to Jessica. She clung to Chani. He has, in truth, seen the water of life? Chani asked. She disengaged herself from Jessica's grip. He has seen, Jessica whispered. Her mind still rolled and stirred from the contact. It was like stepping to solid land after weeks on a heaving sea. She sensed the Reverend Mother within her. and all the others awakened and questioning, what was that? What happened? Where was that place? Through it all threaded the realization that her son was the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who could be many places at once. He was the fact out of the Bene Gesserit dream, and the fact gave her no peace. What happened? China demanded. Jessica shook her head. Paul said, now ready yourself now. This is it. There is in each of us an ancient force that takes and an ancient force that gives. A man finds little difficulty facing the place within himself where the taking force dwells, but it is almost impossible for him to see into the giving force without changing into something other than a man. For a woman, the situation is reverse. Jessica looked up, found China was staring at her while listening to Paul. Do you understand me, mother? Paul asked. She could only nod. These things are so ancient within us, Paul said, that they're ground into each separate cell of our bodies. We're shaped by such forces. You can say to yourself, yes, I see how such a thing may be. But when you look inward and confront the raw force of your own life unshielded, you see your peril. You see that this could overwhelm you. The greatest peril to the giver is the force that takes. The greatest peril to the taker is the force that gives. It is easy to be overwhelmed by giving as by taking. And you, my son, Jessica asked, are you one who gives or one who takes? I'm at the fulcrum, he said. I cannot give without taking, and I cannot take without. He broke off, looking to the wall at his right. Shani felt a draft against her cheek, turned to see the hanging clothes. It was Otheum, Paul said. He was listening. Accepting the words, Chani was touched by some of the prescience that haunted Paul, and she knew a thing yet to be as though it already had occurred. Otheum would speak of what he had seen and heard. Others would spread the story until it was fire over the land. Paul Muad'Dib is not as other men, they would say. There can be no more doubt. He is a man, yet he sees through to the water of life in the way of a Reverend Mother. He is indeed the Lisan al-Gaib. You have seen the future, Paul? Jessica said. Will you say what you've seen? Not the future, he said. I've seen the now.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just stop right here and try to explain the true gravity of what was just said here. Right? Paul took the waters of life, and he saw in that darkness, and in Jessica's darkness, the one thing that no person can see. The force that gives and the force that takes. Now, these are like in cosmic principles here. He saw the cosmic female and the cosmic male, the cosmic giver and the cosmic taker, the primordial forces of human being, of the entirety of the human reality, the giver and the taker. He saw the interplay of those forces inside himself. And he saw it, like he said, unshielded, raw, absolutely, for what it is. For a giver to see that force which takes, it will unmake that person.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's why the Reverend Mothers cannot see the force that takes. Because as a woman, she is more in line with the power that gives, with the force that gives. To see that thing which takes, the force that takes, will unmake everything that she has ever given, will unmake her as a whole. And same thing for the male.
Mm-hmm.
For a man to see that thing which gives will unmake all the things he has ever taken. And he, Paul, being so keenly aware, was able to face that thing inside himself, to become more than a giver, more than a taker, to become the axis on which these things move, the fulcrum. See, we in our ignorance and unknowing of our own selves can be solely a giver or a taker. Paul is the opposite of unaware, the absolute opposite of ignorance. He knows everything. He has a complete understanding of who he is, and understand That Paul, like I said, is omnipresent. He is present in all minds and all things. He is everyone. So for him to have this understanding of who he is, he has a complete and absolute understanding of who we are and sees where the conflict truly lies. Because the giver can only give with no recognition of what is being taken, and the taker can only take with no recognition of what is being given. These forces may be opposed to one another, but they're not opposites. They come from us.
Mm-hmm.
They are our very being, but they oppose one another because we in ourselves cannot recognize the feminine and the masculine and the masculine and the feminine. I mean these in cosmic terms. We cannot recognize these things. So there is what? Conflict. We can only recognize them, I would say. We can only acknowledge them as opposing forces. But for Paul, these forces do not oppose.
Mm-hmm.
There is no opposition
Position.
in Paul. Paul is balance. He is the fulcrum. He is the thing that can give without taking and to take without giving. He sees the interplay of forces in all these things. You know, like it says, I'm the fulcrum. I cannot give without taking. I cannot take without giving. All of these things. There is. So let me try to explain what that means. You know, because I'm using the same words. So let me try to explain what it means. Right. Before, I think I may have talked about the this monomyth among humanity called the chaos Kampf. I know I've brought it up before. I don't
Yeah.
know if I brought it up on here, but the chaos Kampf is this monomyth that you see in a whole bunch of cultures throughout the world. You know, from Sumeria to Japan to Nordic and Greek mythology. You know, to Egyptian mythology.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over the place, and it's this idea of this storm god, the sky father figure who faces this chaos. Usually the chaos takes the form of a dragon or
Mm-hmm.
some reptilian serpentine type of creature. And this serpentine reptilian chaos is always, most of the time, I'm going to say always,
Mm-hmm.
well, majority of the time, that chaotic force is female. And it takes the swaggering sky father, the taker, the cosmic male force, must slay and destroy the female cosmic giving force, the chaos itself. And usually through that conflict, right, reality is formed, right? Is I think it's in the Sumerian myth where it was Tiamat, this cosmic mother figure that gave birth to the gods, right? But then one of the gods slays, her divine consort, and that, makes Tiamat very upset. And Tiamat gives birth to all the demons and all the evils of the world. She herself becomes this great monstrous dragon bent on taking revenge on the gods who had wronged her. And then I think his name is Modoc, if I'm correct. But Modoc, this storm god, this divine sky father, the person who slayed, her lover and became the sky father, took the throne, is sent to battle Tiamat. And he uses the powers of the storm. I think he casts a giant gale into her that opens her mouth, and he shoots this lightning arrow right into her stomach, and she dies. She heaves and dies, and the rest of her enclave, all of the other demons run as Tiamat, this great creature that all the others have fallen before, is now dead. And from her corpse, Modoc forms the world. He bisects her like a fish and takes her skin and uses it to form the sky. and takes her body and uses that to form the earth. And her eyes become the Indus rivers, and all the waters of the world, you know, that is being reflected here.
Mm-hmm.
That's just one of the many
Right.
variations of this same,
Myth.
myth,
Mm-hmm.
this monomyth, this chaos comes when the divine female is slayed and taken control by the divine male. These cosmic forces, their interplay. Now, I want you to think about this. That why is it in all of these myths that chaos, quote unquote, must be slayed, must be killed, destroyed. Its corpse must be used and grinded into meat and dust. So the paternal figure, the cosmic male, can make the world. What does that say about us?
Mm-hmm.
It says just what is said right here, that inside there is the giver and the taker. These things, like I said, may be opposed, but are not opposites. They may be stand on other sides of each other, but they are natural forces. The interplay of these forces is what allows all of reality to exist. We've always acknowledged it. In our midst, and even right here, we acknowledge the interplay of these forces. But the fact that the interplay always comes down to conflict, comes down to slaying and killing these forces, lets you know just how deeply ingrained the perceptual basis for this jihad is. You understand where this fight is actually coming from. It comes from a people that can only perceive reality through conflict, who can only perceive creation and form through conflict, who can only see it to such an extent that they see chaos as formless.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right? When in reality, chaos isn't formless, it's just outside of the human form. We cannot exist in that. Well, evidently we can, since that's where the gods come from.
Right.
But we use that to construct a human reality. We use the chaos, quote unquote, this unbidden force of creation, the raw materials of reality that takes the form of this dragon, this feminine aspect that must be dominated and destroyed by the male, by the divine masculine aspects. And the interplay of these forces, the conflict of these forces, these opposing yet not opposites, the things that they're so intrinsically connected and dependent upon one another, but they only know how to be in one way, and that is opposing forces.
Mm-hmm.
That is through conflict. That is through the jihad. Like I said, it is never ending. It colors everything. It is our very being. This war, this fight. Like I said, I brought it up before that we are trying to win a battle that we don't even know we're fighting. And this is it. We can't justify our existence outside of this conflict. Our world was formed by it. Our gods were made gods because of it. Our demons are demons because of it. It
Mm-hmm.
colors everything. This chaos comes, this fight, this interplay of forces of the divine cosmic male and the divine cosmic female. Until those things can coalesce into a being, into a understanding, a perspective that is not at odds with itself, we will always find ourselves right back here. Paul, though, like I said, is balance.
Mm-hmm.
He is the fulcrum between these things, which means that the interplay becomes, what can I say? I don't want to say less. The interplay becomes his, in a sense. He's that thing which brings balance to the eternal conflict of giver and taker.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is able to act in the knowledge of both. But yet, like I said, yet the jihad is still coming. The jihad is still happening. Why is that? If he is all of us, right? Why is it that this looming battle is still coming when Paul has been able to find an internal balance? When Paul is everyone. Well, I'll tell you why. Because when you look at this conflict, when you look at the forces at play here, Paul Paul is able to realize in and of himself where the forces lie. And he sees it in all of us. And he is trying desperately to impart the same perceptual base that he has, that has allowed him to calm the storm inside, to end the conflict inside of himself. He's trying desperately to impart that to us. But how can you teach a lesson
It can't be taught.
that can't be taught?
Right.
How can you teach about peace in a people who only understand things
right.
through war,
Mm-hmm.
through conflict, through a battle? Right? There's a difference between knowing a thing and experiencing a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Paul has experienced peace, experienced balance. He knows it intuitively. We may know of it, but we haven't experienced it. And the very basis of our knowledge
Mm-hmm.
will not allow for us to do that. Now you see
Mm-hmm.
why all of this is so impossible, why it's unavoidable, why it's inevitable. Because we cannot exist without it.
Yep.
It's the whole reason why we do exist. You know, I think it's an imbalance of if I remember this correctly, there's the whole reason why reality exists is because there's an imbalance between matter and antimatter. And because these things are not in balance, the entirety of the universe is trying to correct for that. And that allows for movement. That allows for expansion. It allows for, explosions and supernovas that give rise to new elements. The universe is trying to become in balance, right? But it can't because it is not in balance.
Right.
It was created out of balance. So this conflict, when I say it is cosmic, I mean that. But the only place where peace is possible, it's in our reality. It is in the one that we say, in the one that we get to create.
Mm-hmm.
Because peace is not a universal norm. Chaos is. Chaos, there's a whole other conversation.
Right. Yes.
And what you believe chaos to be.
Mm-hmm.
I personally see chaos as the thing which lies beyond God. I see God as something as the ultimate prophet, the divine dreamer, that thing that is able to create for us, right? That's what God does. God creates the world, but chaos always lies beyond God. God is able to translate this chaos into a form that we can exist in. But like all translations, something is always lost. And you see that thing. God can see it. God can exist in it, but we cannot. We exist as a consequence of the translation. There's always going to be something of a drift between these two ideals. And until we as people can recognize that, you're not necessarily correcting for it.
Right.
Because that drift is what is the human perspective. It's that space that allows for peace.
Mm-hmm. That nuance, right?
That nuance. Mm-hmm. But until we recognize that there is a drift and that it's that which allows us to have the freedom to create something unlike anything in all of reality, then all we will ever do is this.
Yep.
Is this conflict.
Mm-hmm.
All the news, like you said, all the news, tumultuous news that we've been hearing about, and all the different things, all these people, all these protests, all these laws being passed, our leaders betraying us and showing themselves what they actually, all this stuff. We've seen it time and time again. And when the dust is settled from this, we're going to see it again.
Yep.
Over and over and over again. Because we have not taken advantage of the space provided for us by the limitations of our knowledge in and of itself.
To do something else.
Right. Paul, like I said, Jessica's knowledge is useful. You can create from that because there is a limitation in it. Paul is living this. Paul's perspective is the perspective beyond God. It is the perspective of pure chaos in and of itself. It is balance. Absolute, unequivocal, inexorable balance. And what is balance on a cosmic scale? It is the interplay of forces. It is matter and antimatter.
Right.
It is the giver and taker.
Right.
It is conflict. Conflict, people.
Mm-hmm.
It is endless and absolute until we
decide to do something else. Right.
Because we are limited. We are limited, which means that it can affect us only so much. We can affect it only so much. But in that space, there can be peace.
Right.
There can be brotherhood. There can be balance without conflict. There can be all those things that we say we want.
Right.
Paul knows it.
Right.
But he is the axis on which the entirety of reality turns. He can't create it. He is
the fulcrum, right?
He's the fulcrum. He wants to be the dreamer, the thing that is able to translate that for us, but he can't.
Right.
He is it. We have to play that role. But we are trapped in his vision now. The vision, our vision. He is us, we are it.
Mm-hmm.
We are trapped in that now. It is inescapable. So Paul knows that the true battle is lost. There is no avoiding the jihad. The jihad is reality in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
It is who he is. It is the role he was meant to play. All of these forces, everything, every myth, every saying, every system we've ever created, all of our gods, all of our presidents, all of our kings, all of our peasants, every rich and poor man, all of our wants and desires, everything takes us deeper and deeper into this conflict.
Mm-hmm. That binary.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what it is, right?
It colors everything that we are. Like you said, these things are so ancient within us that they're ground into each separate cell of our bodies. Mm-hmm. We are made from it. It is who we are. Mm-hmm. Right? But unbidden, we know we can be something else. We know that the human reality is one of brotherhood and peace.
Right.
That's the one that we know, and that's how we say that we're failing. We're not monsters. We aren't conflict. We are born from conflict, made for conflict, but it is through us that we can be something else. Our reality, like I said, is entirely solipsistic. Mm-hmm. It is entirely dependent upon what we do.
We have choices here.
We can do that.
Something, yes.
We're the dreamers. Mm-hmm. We're the ones who can translate reality into a human one. We refuse to do that. We try to marry the human reality with the cosmic reality. And much like everything else, there is dissonance. There is dissonance. You can't marry these things. The only reason why you exist is because imbalance.
Right.
The world isn't meant for balance. It's not meant for peace. Mm-hmm. We, humans, are meant for peace.
Right. We can do this.
We can do that.
We can do that. Right.
But that's the freedom we have.
Right.
That's not the freedom that the people of Dune have, that the people of the Imperium have.
Right.
They're now trapped inside of Paul's vision, inside of our own constructed reality. Mm-hmm. Chaos has come down and incarnated inside of the eyes of Paul Muad'Dib, inside of the perceptual basis of reality in and of itself. And now it is poised to spread out over everything because we are creating it. It has no choice but to be that. Mm-hmm. We've created a vacuum, an empty pocket where the waters of chaos is all it's rushing and moving. Right. But much like Moda, when he took the skin of Tiamat and used it to push back the chaos and make the sky. It's just a globe floating. Mm-hmm. But now it's cracking and the waters are rushing in. And then it's up to Paul Muad'Dib to be the final requiem nail, to be the final nail in the coffin, and bring it all crashing down. He has no other choice but to be that.
See, that's what you want. You want that leader?
Yep.
Here it comes.
And now we're going to see, like, for us today, the form is, Republican, Democrat, left, right, whatever you call it.
Right. Trash.
Rich, poor, all that good stuff. But for Paul, the forces are a bit different, and we're going to see. He forced himself to a sitting position, waved Chani aside, and she moved to help him. The space above Arrakis is rifled with the ships of the guild. Jessica trembled at the certainty in his voice. The Padishah Emperor himself is there, Paul said. He looked at the rock ceiling of his cell, with his favorite truthsayer and 5 legions of Sardaukar. The Yoda Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is there, with Thufir Hawat beside him, and 7 ships jammed with every conscript he could muster. Every great house has its raiders above us, waiting. Chani shook her head, unable to look away from Paul. His strangeness, the flat tone of voice, the way he looked through her, filled her with awe. Jessica tried to swallow, and a dry throat said, "For what are they waiting?" Paul looked at her. For the guild's permission to land. The guild will strand on Arrakis any force that lands without permission. The guild's protecting us? Jessica asked. Protecting us? The guild itself calls us for spreading tales about what we do here, and by reducing troop transport fares to a point where even the poorest houses are up there now, waiting to loot us. Jessica noted the lack of bitterness in his tone, wondered at it. She couldn't doubt his words. They had the same intensity she'd seen in him the night he'd revealed the path of the future that had taken them among the freemen. Paul took a deep breath, said, "Mother, you must change the quantity of the water for us. We need the catalyst. Chani, have a scout force sent out to find a pre-spice mass. If we plant a quantity of the water of life above a pre-spice mass, do you know what will happen?" Jessica weighed his words, suddenly saw through to his meaning. "Paul!" she gasped. "The water of death," he said. "It'll be a chain reaction." He pointed to the floor, spreading death among the little makers, killing a vector of the life cycle that includes the spice in the makers. Arrakis will become a true desolation, without spice or maker. Chani put a hand to her mouth, shocked to numb silence by the blasphemy pouring from Paul's lips. He who can destroy a thing has the real control over it, Paul said. We can destroy the spice. What stays the guild's hand? Jessica whispered. They're searching for me, Paul said. Think of that. The finest guild navigators, men who can quest ahead through time to find the safest course for the fastest highliners, all of them seeking me and unable to find me. How they tremble. They know I have their secret. Paul held out his cup's hands. Without the spice, they're blind. Chani found her voice. You said you see the now? Paul lay back, searching the spreading out present, its limits extended into the future and into the past, holding on to the awareness with difficulty as the spice illumination began to fade. Go do as I commanded, he said. The future is becoming as muddled for the guild as it is for me. The lines of vision are narrowing. Everything focuses here where the spice is, where they've dared not interfere before, because to interfere was to lose what they must have. But now they're desperate. All paths lead them into darkness. Like I said, the stage has been set.
Yeah.
All the houses, the Padishah Emperor, the Harkonnens, everyone there is ready to loot the corpse of Arrakis, of Dune. But the one thing that is stopping them, it's the guild. Like we've seen many a times before, the guild is the only people, the only force in the universe that is able to move things throughout the Imperium. How do they do it? We find out right here. They use the spice to press their consciousness forward in time so they can find the safest, most expedient routes for these giant spaceships to hurl throughout space.
Right.
Without the spice, the guild cannot do this, and the entirety of the Imperium comes to a standstill. So they don't want to risk the spice, and the spice can only be found on Arrakis. So Paul comes up with his most daring plan yet. So take and pause right quick.
Right.
Somebody having fun out there, right? He comes up with his most daring plan yet. He's going to he tells his mother to transform a quantity of the spice and to find the biggest pre-spice mass that they can. Now, water is dangerous
Right.
to the makers, the sandworms. It's the drowning of the sandworm in the water that creates the waters of life, right? The water is poison to the sandworms, and the sandworms create the spice,
Right.
right? We see that it gets revealed throughout the book as well. But the sandworms create the spice. So if Paul sets off this chain of death, uses the water of death, set up this chain reaction that systematically begins to leashes all of this water of death onto the planet. It kills all the makers. The makers can't make the spice, and without the spice,
Y'all are
the
doomed.
Imperium
Right.
comes to a standstill. Right? So there's two options to the guild. Let loose the forces of the entirety of the Imperium on to Arrakis and hope that they kill Paul before this happens. They're able to locate and kill Paul before this, or give in. Give in to Paul's demands, and unleash the jihad.
He hasn't
This is
fired a
where we
shot
are.
yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Like I said, the stage is being set.
Uh-huh.
Like it was like this is the form the jihad is taking for Paul. We know what the form is for us. And Paul is making his play. Like I said, he who destroys the thing has true control over it. That's where power comes from, not from creation, but destruction. That's why chaos has to be pushed back. That's why chaos must be defeated, quote unquote. Must be slayed. Because chaos is the unmaking force of the universe. It is beyond destruction. Destruction is a human construct. Chaos does more than destroy. It unmakes. It undoes. The force which can do that is the true power. And now, Paul, being chaos incarnate, is wielding his ultimate power to bring ultimate destruction to the Imperium itself. To unleash a thing, like I said, Chani, that is blasphemous.
Right.
That is blasphemous amongst these people. To use all this water that they gathered up to create a paradise, but to use it to render Arrakis desolate, even without spice. But he knows there's only a set timetable for them to do this because they're growing desperate. They're growing desperate because the future is getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer for the guild and for Paul. But the thing is, Paul lives in that darkness.
Right.
He knows what's out there. It's him.
Right.
And the jihad.
That's right. He says what you want.
But the guild, they don't know. But they will learn.
Correct.
But that, I often say that's the end of the true battle. Right? Everything left is political moving and, Paul gathering his forces and stuff like that. And we're going to read about that. But the ending of this chapter, Paul gaining the sight beyond sight, ensures the jihad. There is no more hope for us. Throughout the book, we've seen how Paul takes little steps to try to curtail the jihad as much as he can. When he takes the name Muad'Dib, in his vision, that's his name. It's Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib, Muad'Dib. So he changes it to Paul Muad'Dib. Hopefully, curtailing a bit of this coming force. But it came all the same. How can he stand against it? He is it. He is us. We are creating it. We have no choice. It has no choice. We've, I don't know what's a good analogy for it. We've stretched and pulled all of reality like a rubber band. And now it's gone so taut. And that's all of reality. That's all reality has ever been. There's a stretching and pulling at it, but now our grip is loosening.
Yep.
And Paul, with one final decisive blow, is going to let loose all of those things that we've been holding back, quote unquote, for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the imperium runs on the oppression of the freemen. Now the freemen, their rage shall be encapsulated in this jihad. Not just their rage, but the rage and the tumult, the momentum of a world built on conflict. The coin is flipped. The die has been cast.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. There's no going back from this. Why is that? How can we find? Why are we at this point? Like I've exhaustively explained throughout this entire episode.
Right.
Is the question really could be is how could we not be?
Mm-hmm.
How could we not be? We shirk our responsibilities. We build from conflict. We're born from conflict and then we build from conflict, which means we are subject to its rules. Once more, you win and you lose. You're up and you're down. The Imperium's been on its way up. Now it's on its way down.
Mm-hmm.
This is the flow of reality. We know we can create something else.
Mm-hmm.
We can create something else for us to exist in. But that requires a bit more from us. It requires us to not be failures. It requires us to be human beings, to build from what we know. It requires love and humanity and all that other grand utopian ideals that we think are just too damn hard for us. You know, you say love and peace and go from that. It just seems so unrealistic as opposed to this.
Right. Yeah, this is the real right here.
We are born with empathy.
Right.
The world robs you of it. It robs you of empathy to such a degree that you think when you empathize and it puts you a step ahead of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't. Like I said, that's the most basic. That's step one. That's the bar.
Right. You haven't even done anything.
That's not the work. Being able to empathize with another person's pain. Like when people when we talked before about about the Bible and there's like well, I don't hate gay people.
Right.
The Bible's like, well, you got to kill all the gay people. I don't do that. And you think that's not progress,
right? That's not a
realistic
like right?
21st century take on it. That's not. That's the bar. So you have common empathy. So you empathize enough with enough person knows to not murder them because they're gay. Oh wow. what a monumental thing you've done.
Whew, we've come a long way.
And the fact that we live in the world where people can see that as progress. Mm-hmm. Getting back to where we started.
Right.
Can see that as progress lets you know the amount of work that we need to do. Mm-hmm. We live in a world, like I said, that robs us of our agency, that treats respect, love, and brotherhood as commodities. Mm-hmm. When, like I said, these things are as indispensable to parsing out our reality as sight and hearing. But we don't use them that way. Mm-hmm. We have not created from it. We've created from the universal constant. We've created from imbalance. We can't see the motion of balance, of brotherhood. Mm-hmm. We don't know how to live in it. They're foregone ideals, only created in small little pockets, maybe, while the world dies. You know, we all got to cut off a little piece for ourselves, a little piece of happiness. Like I said, we've been doing that for thousands upon thousands of years. There's nothing left to take. Mm-hmm. There's no other piece for you to cut off. No little part for you to make your own stand, to make your own. No. There's nothing left. It is in everything. And it is incumbent upon all of us. Because if we don't, we risk a Paul Muad'Dib. We risk jihad. Mm-hmm. We risk absolute balance. No nuance. No complexity. We risk, like I said, we risk that the whip of the rubber band, the flip of the coin. Mm-hmm. Every single time. That's all it ever comes down to. No control, no self-control. Mm-hmm. Everything rolling in on itself because we don't want to learn. We don't want to create a reality. We don't want to perform our own magic, so we rely on the magic of everything else. Mm-hmm. And so it does the only thing it can it incarnates and it breaks. That's what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Paul sees this. He doesn't want to be it. He does not want to be the Muad'Dib. He does not want to be the Lisan El Gaib. Barely wants to be a Duke.
Right.
All of these things were thrust upon him.
Mm-hmm.
He has no other choice but to be cosmic balance, but to be the giver and the taker, to embody all these forces,
Mm-hmm.
to be both swaggering storm god and chaotic mother goddess.
Yep. You want him to make all of the decisions for you. That's
you
what
want
you
a
want.
leader.
Yes, that's what you want, right?
You want someone to point the way.
That's right.
Something to point the way for you.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what you're going to get.
It robs you of your own agency. It takes you away from yourself and traps you in what they create when someone sees for you. And now he sees.
Mm-hmm.
He sees everything. And now even he's trapped by it. We're all trapped by it.
Mm-hmm.
He was trapped before we were. We trapped him, and in turn, he trapped us.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's rolling in on itself.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I just find that to be so, I don't know, poignant. You know, there's a beauty in recognizing just what we are not. We ain't this.
Right.
We aren't in Paul's place.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you don't want to be in Paul's place. You don't want to have a Kwisatz Haderach, figure out of your dreams come to life. You don't want someone with that amount of power. You don't want someone like that. You really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you do have it, you are subject to their will. The story doesn't become about you, it becomes about them. And you have to live in whatever they create.
Yes.
Because it's not your story anymore. But we constantly, like you said, myth building.
Mm-hmm.
Constantly doing this over and over again. But in real life, they can't write for you.
Yep.
They can't do it.
They can't think for you.
They can't think for you. They
Right.
can't see for you. They can't do it.
Right.
Only you can create your reality.
Mm-hmm.
And it is until every last one of us decides to create from those utopian, grandiose, impossible ideals.
Like brotherhood.
Like, respect. I don't
Right.
know. So impossible.
Dignity, right.
Until we build from that.
Right.
This is what we're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
This is what we're going to get. And like I said, human beings aren't capable of chaos. We're capable of madness. Chaos is constructive. It is a form beyond form, that which lies beyond God.
Mm-hmm.
It is the primordial. Madness ain't that.
Right.
Madness is what happens is when people like us refuse to acknowledge what it is that we are and what we ought to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's madness.
Oh, yeah.
There is no delusion
right.
in chaos.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of delusion in us. Because everything about us gears us toward community and society and humanity. But yet we create a world that robs us of all these things.
Right. Yeah, we fight against that.
We create a world that runs off of the imbalance,
Mm-hmm.
runs off of profit,
Mm-hmm.
runs off of these principles, and think that, that's just what it is.
Right.
For who? For the ants, yes, that's just what it is. For the ants.
Right. Right.
And for the stars, and for the planets, and the moons, that's just what it is for them.
Right. But it's
not for us.
Not for us. Right.
We get a choice here. And when you don't choose something chooses for you.
Again, we just have to just catch up to the knowledge. Like,
I know that we already know.
Yeah, catch up to what we already. I know that so many things that we have discussed here and in previous episodes. I know that you know what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we keep responding in a way that is opposite of the things that we know. We know better.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we just feel as if, I don't even know, if we were actually feeling,
mm-hmm.
then maybe we wouldn't even be in this situation. I don't know.
But I know you feel.
I know you do.
You're uncomfortable. You see the injustice
Mm-hmm.
in this world and you call it injustice.
Right.
You see the imbalance. You see the conflict. You see the same old again. Fascists, once again.
Right. Unjust laws. I mean, they're not even laws. I mean, what is this foolishness that's going on here?
We're seeing it over and over
Mm-hmm.
again. and you recognize it. You point at it and say, there's something wrong with that. You know it is. That's why
Right.
you're listening to us.
Right.
You can point at it and say that there's
Something's
something
wrong.
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But where it all falls apart is that we, those people who point and say there's something wrong, refuse to acknowledge that we are complicit in what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That what's wrong here isn't that they're rich and you're poor. That's not what's wrong. What's wrong is the fact that we are living in a world where rich and poor exist.
Correct.
Where
Right.
you can have those with too much and those with nothing at
Mm-hmm.
all. And that seems to be the only reality we can create from.
And then rationalize from it as well.
Yeah.
You know.
You're poor, you want to get rich.
Mm-hmm.
You want your piece of the pie. You want what you're owed.
Mm-hmm.
And you are owed. Right?
Yes.
And you want that. You want it from over there. But guess what? That's just the flipping of the coin. That's
Mm-hmm.
the snap of the rubber band, the crack of the whip. Once again, playing out.
Right. And then how many times has it been mentioned, that those who are at the top, you know, they're gonna fall to the bottom, and those at the bottom is gonna rise to the top. Folks are reigning for 500 years, 1,000 years. Their reign is gonna fall, and you think it's gonna happen by way of, I don't know, osmosis and whatever the case may be. It's about that term.
We all know that it doesn't work.
Right.
That what we build from cannot create the type of lasting peace that we say that we want.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then again, maybe
But,
because for 1,000 years, I guess for empire to last for 1,000 years, that is an accomplishment.
yeah.
Even though we all know it's destined to fail at some point. We have to change what it is that we build.
Right.
We know what we want. We have to change how we want it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to get it through electing a senator.
I think that's pretty. I mean, maybe it wasn't obvious before, but I think
it's pretty obvious
it's
now.
pretty obvious now.
We're not going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
With our votes, we're not going to get it that way. Not to say not to vote or not to elect
Right.
the senators, not to
Mm-hmm.
do those things. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, the real change
Mm-hmm.
comes from people, from us, deciding that this is no longer tenable.
Mm-hmm.
This is no longer acceptable. We are no longer going to pay the price of each other.
Mm-hmm.
No life is expendable. Being that up should not mean that there are people who should be this down. We have a world that robs us of our agency. So you got the internet has connected us more than ever, but everyone feels so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only thing that truly feels omnipresent isn't brotherhood, but problems. It's the imbalance. It's the gap between everyone. That's the only omnipresence that we have. And we see it playing out once again. Once again. Foolishness in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Foolishness from our leaders. Rolling over.
Mm-hmm.
Over and over again. And you read a book like Dune and it points exactly why.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly why. Caught up in then a wrong dukes, striving for his status and position. And that right there encapsulates every issue that every human being has ever faced, ever. I say, how could not?
Mm-hmm.
All of us are wronged. All of us are owed. All of us want what we are owed. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you are playing it out this way,
right?
As long as you're doing it this way, we are doomed to jihad. Because our enemies are us. They're all humans. Our enemies are us. We are doing this to ourselves. We are creating it. We can't see beyond it. We can't exist without it. Because we have lived in it for so long. Like I said, we think that this is it.
Right.
We've done this for so long. We think that this is the way the world is supposed to be. Like you said, there's a giant world war being fought right now between the ants. There's these giant. No, you can look it up.
Yeah, I know,
There's
right?
these giant mega colonies of ants that
Getting
are
it on,
fighting out
right?
this war, and they are hopeless. They are going to be fighting
Hmm.
forever.
But we are not ants.
Trillions of
We're not ants,
ants are
right?
dying
Right.
every single day,
Hmm. We're not
but
ants.
we ain't ants.
You know.
There is hope for us, and that's what makes it so frustrating.
Yep. We do not have to do
Is
this.
that we don't
Don't have
have to
to
do
do
this.
this.
It doesn't have to be this way, you know. And every day we wake up in this. We make a choice to exist in the world as it is. We are failing.
Hmm.
Every day has been a failure for us, for me, for all of us.
Hmm.
Because there's only so far that we ever could go. We exist in failure because we refuse to do the thing that we're supposed to do. We refuse to acknowledge this battle that
Hmm.
we've been fighting, and we refuse to be like, okay, that's it. We draw the line in the sand and say, here, but no further. We can do it
Yeah, we
is
can do that. Trust me.
agonizingly,
Yes.
agonizingly,
Hmm.
tantalizingly possible. It's right there. Just don't. I just
But
don't.
right. It's just can you not
Can you not?
kill?
Yeah,
you know.
just don't. Don't do
You
it.
know.
Don't do it. Just
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. Just don't. Yeah. How about that?
Like it's, uh,
Yeah.
and the fact that I say that and like, well, but there's all
Yeah.
like
Yep. Here
there's
you
always
go.
going to
Yep.
be
It's
like,
gonna. Oh.
oh,
Mm-hmm.
no, that I
Yep.
can just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we all try to rationalize and
Yep.
justify all
Mm-hmm.
the reasons why we are going to do it. Then you're not looking for peace. Like I said, you're not looking for freedom. You're looking for your turn. You're looking for the coin to flip, for the band, for the crack, for the whip to crack, and for your turn, for your opportunity to stand on the other side.
Yep.
That's what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well.
and as long as you're looking for it, get ready for your Paul Muad'Dibs.
Mm-hmm.
Get ready for people who make prophecy move, who make the world move for you because you've put them there. And now they're going to drag you along right into. What does Donald Trump get a Paul
I
Muad'Dib?
mean.
Donald Trump is a Paul Muad'Dib.
Mm-hmm.
Prophecy moves around this
Yeah.
man. And he is dragging everybody else with him. See,
Mm-hmm.
that's what happens when you're not doing the work you're supposed to be doing.
Joe Biden.
You get people like that.
Mm-hmm.
You get a world that wants to move with someone like that.
Right.
Of people who would choose someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we refuse to
To
build
do
from
that's right.
something else.
That's right. We refuse to do the work that needs to be done.
The infrastructure's
Mm-hmm.
here, the people's here, everything's here.
And yet here we are.
And we don't have a Paul, which
Right.
means we are free.
Right.
But
Here we are.
here we are. So yeah, this is it. Our next episode will be our final episode on Dune. You know, this is where it all ends.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, it's been that's the real actual final big discussion part. Everything else is just
Yeah, we're gonna just
it's
put
just
it all
closing it
together.
out.
Close it out.
But yeah, that's been Dune.
It's been great, actually.
It's exactly what it is. But yeah, I don't want to get too much into that because they've still got one more episode.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you
So-
know, if you have any questions, comments, leave them in the comments. And as always, thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you so much.